Team skills for process improvement. Unit 3 of 8. Team roles and relationships. Part 2 of 6. Selecting the process for initial improvement efforts. Additional selection criteria may be applied by the ESC as they reach consensus on initial process improvement efforts. It is critical to have the appropriate people involved and to have them develop a sense of ownership in the improvement effort. Having higher and subordinate levels involved in an iterative selection process is an important first step. A good candidate for initial improvement efforts typically exhibits the following characteristics. 1. The process is mission essential. It is important because it has value and credibility with the workforce. 2. It offers the greatest opportunity for improvement. Choose a process that provides the greatest opportunity for improvement, especially improvement that can be recognized by the customer and measured easily. Select a process that directly affects external customers. It is critical to develop measurements that translate the needs of the customer into action. Before such measurements can be determined, it is necessary to identify the aspects of a product or service that are important to the customer. These aspects are what we previously referred to as quality characteristics. Some examples of quality characteristics are timeliness, reliability, durability, or ease of use. 3. Improvement is visible in a short time. Target an issue that is likely to exhibit a high degree of improvement in the shortest possible time. If you choose a process that recycles once every day or so, the effect of changes will show up in a relatively short time, perhaps only a few weeks. 4. The process is not undergoing major transitions. If you select a process that is undergoing major transitions, it will be difficult to stabilize and impossible to measure. 5. It is relatively simple with clearly defined starting and ending points. Select a process that is relatively simple with clearly defined starting and ending points. This is not a time to study a large or complex system. Such a system would have to be broken down into its component processes and sub-processes. In summary, some of these process selection criteria are not just limited to an initial selection, but can be used as guidelines for selection of all process improvement efforts. Remember, success generates success, and positive results with maximum publicity will gain support for your implementation efforts. Process boundaries. Only a clearly defined process should be selected for initial process study. ESCs sometimes make the mistake of selecting a desired solution or issue instead of a process or system. Answering these questions will help ensure that the process selected is well defined and members are appropriate for the team. 1. Where does the process start? 2. What are the inputs to the process? 3. Who do the inputs come from? Like suppliers. 4. What are the macro steps in the process? 5. What functional areas are involved? 6. Is the process cross-functional? 7. Where does the process end? 8. What are the outputs? 9. Who receives the outputs or the customers? If the results of the team checklist or process boundary analysis reveal that the team's membership needs to be modified, either add, delete, or substitute, take the appropriate action or work with the team sponsor, like QMC or ESC, to ensure the appropriate changes in membership are accomplished. The charter, which we will discuss in a few minutes in more detail, should define the membership limits of authority and process boundaries. In order to properly identify and define a process, it is important to identify your customers and suppliers. There are internal and external customers for any process. Each person involved in a process is both a customer and a supplier. In the customer role, each person in the process receives a product or input from a preceding operation or step. This input could be raw material, a computer printout, etc. Upon receiving input, a person or team performs his or her designated tasks in the process and, in the supplier role, passes the product or output along to the next person in the process. Each worker assumes the roles of both customer and supplier. This customer-supplier relationship continues down the line until the final product goes out the door and is delivered to the external customer. External customers are the final end users in the process. Perceiving the next person in the process as a customer and trying to meet or exceed that customer's requirements can greatly facilitate process improvement and should be encouraged throughout the organization. However, sometimes organizations become so wrapped up with promoting good internal customer-supplier relationships that they tend to forget about external customer. The primary focus must be on the external customer. Quality Management Committee, QMC. 1. It is composed of middle managers or process owners. A QMC is a cross-functional team composed of the managers who are jointly responsible for managing a significant product or service process. Each manager has some stake or ownership in the success or failure of the process producing the product or service under consideration. A QMC is chartered when the process associated with a mission requirement or a customer's quality characteristic has been prioritized and selected for improvement. A QMC lasts only as long as the product or service is important to the organization. If the process is no longer strategically important to the organization, then the QMC charter would be recalled by the ESC. However, most significant processes are so closely linked to the mission that they don't change very often. Thus, most QMCs are relatively long-standing. If a process is very large and complex, it may be necessary to establish a hierarchy of QMCs, with a high-level QMC overseeing the coordination of one or more lower-level QMCs. This coordination ensures that the effort of the lower-level QMC do not sub-optimize or conflict with each other. In other words, the higher-level QMC is managing a network of processes or systems. Under no circumstances should a higher-level QMC charter a lower-level QMC, simply to have other people do its work. Lower level QMC should have charters that support the aims of the higher level QMC's charter. 2. Develops a plan for process improvement. The primary concerns of a QMC are planning and executing the process improvement efforts identified by the ESC. The QMC is responsible for translating its charter into a process improvement plan. One of the first things that the QMC must tackle is to further flesh out the macro level flowchart provided in the charter by ESC. Since the QMC is composed of the process owners, its members collectively know more about the process than anyone. They also are in the best position to refine the planning details for developing, testing, and evaluating process improvement. The QMC also needs to translate the quality characteristics identified by the customers into measurable characteristics. 3. Initiates process analysis. After flowcharting the process selected for study to identify all of the steps, the QMC may want to simplify the process by working on obvious omissions or duplications in the process flow. Changes, if any, will require standardization of the new process, probably through training and/or new instructions. The QMC may need to charter a path to help collect current process performance data. These data can be used later for determining the effectiveness of process changes. After simplifying the process, the QMC works with the path to stabilize the process by removing special causes. 4. Charters process action teams. During process analysis, the QMC is responsible for collecting baseline data on process performance. The QMC may charter a path to help as necessary in the data collection and analysis. The QMC must be ready to provide the path with resource and decision support. This should be spelled out in the charter provided to the path. 5. Begins continual process improvement. Once the QMC has standardized, and stabilized the process, its primary responsibility becomes the practice of continual process improvement. This includes planning details to design, test, and evaluate process changes using the Deming PDCA cycles. Based on data received from the path, the QMC evaluates the effectiveness of the changes to the process. The QMC must ensure that no other part of the process is sub-optimized at the expense of the aims of the system. 6. Recommends major process changes to the ESC. The cost or scope of a proposed process change may be beyond the authority spelled out in the QMC's charter. When this happens, the QMC goes to the ESC for resolution. The QMC provides the ESC with the proposed recommendations for action and the data to substantiate the recommendations.